Hi, my name is Jacob and welcome to another episode of Raw and Uncut on the Abrasive Conversations platform. In this particular segment, I want to speak about something that is very personal to me and something that is actually very controversial, and that is the so-called colored identity. Believe it or not, growing up, I was never raised as a colored person. I only encountered the colored identity or coloredness when I finished school, joined the South African Defence Force, and suddenly I had to live out a kind of colored figure. So it was expected of me to live out a specific stereotype. So it's something that really never took hold of my psyche, being colored. So later when I joined the university, people constantly assumed that I was colored, and that this particular figure of the colored person and the stereotype was there, and it's expected of you to live out that specific racial stereotype or that specific image. And that coloredness kind of was pressed onto you. You have to be that specific thing. And I resisted it for many years. And I think that resistance finally led me to write a book on the so-called colored identity. And this book will come out maybe in the coming months. It already has a publisher. I cannot reveal a lot of the information around it, but it has a publisher. It's going to come out, and the title of the book is the attempted erasure of the Cloete and San people in South Africa. So that book is going to come out. And it's a book that shares my journey with the specific colored identity and how this was never identity that was accepted in the community that I was growing up. There was different other identity constructs that the state kind of erased and didn't want us to live that out. So it was an interesting journey for me, because this book, I started writing this book, or the concept of this particular book, I started writing it from 2017, just after I completed my PhD. So I started writing this book. So 5 years later, I finally have this book now. Another interesting thing about this book, it was turned down by 5 publishers, and so finally this year, 6 publishers decided that they're interested in publishing the book. So in building up and over the course of my journey, I read many books with regards to the colored identity, where it comes from, and how I then was kind of forced into this specific identity. So I have in front of me a number of books that I consulted and consulted to write the book. And I think I want to share some of these books. Some of these books are really old books, and some of them are quite newer books. I think what I want to do in the coming segments of Raw and Uncut is to go through, kind of review one of these 2 books, or 1 or 2 books of the continued growing literature on what happened after 1652. And talking about 1652, one of the books that is a must read for students and people who want to know about what happened at 1652 and have an alternative history of 1652 is this particular book. This book by Patrick Mallet, The Lie of 1652, A Decolonized History of the Land, is a quite interesting book. And what Mallet does really significantly good in this book is to trace a much longer historical narrative that starts way before 1652. And a large part of this book are dealing with what happened with the formation of the first kind of Dutch colonial settlement here at the Cape. But that specific book doesn't deal with where my book is kind of going, the erasure of the Khoikhoi and San people in South Africa. And what I found, that erasure was largely bureaucratically. But I don't want to give away too early of the book, but just know the book is coming. Another book that was interesting for me to read on my journey was this book by Dr. June Mellett, or now Professor June Mellett. She was the previous director of the Center for Khoisan, the Khoisan Center at UCT. And this book is Aussie Told Me. So Aussie is a Khoikhoi go up word. Khoikhoi go up means Khoikhoi go up, meaning the language of the Khoikhoi or Khoikhoi language. So Aussie means elder sister. So Aussie told me why Cape, her historiographies matter. And I like the subtitle of this book, Her Historiographies, because one of the things that doesn't come through is the voices of women in South Africa. And this is dedicated to many of the women whose voices is not there. Another book that I found interesting was this particular book, Bushmen in a Victorian World. And this quite older book is written by Andrew Bank, and it is about the Lucy Lloyd and kind of Willem Blake collection of Bushman folklore in Cape Town. So, and this opens the kind of British colonialism and what happened under British colonialism. So the lie of 1652 marked kind of Dutch colonialism, but there was a moment where British colonialism took place in South Africa, and that also led to they also contributed to the genocide of the Khoikhoi and the San. Much older books on that I consulted is Afrikaans Books. So this particular book, Die Noordwaartse Beweging van die Boere voor die Groot Trek. So this particular book it's an Afrikaans book, but it deals with the genocide of the San people. So there is a much recent account of the genocide, and that is the one by Muhammad Adakari. But this is an older version of it. So I read this book, and then I read Adakari's book to kind of put the genocide into context. So if you read this old Afrikaans books, they are very, very racist. And they unapologetically racist. But it's important to read these type of books because it helps, it reveals the sentiments that is still largely part in the South African society. Another older book that I consulted was the Cape Coloured People, 1652 to 1937. So what is interesting here is it starts with 1652. So it is written by Afrikaans scholar, and this Afrikaner scholar really starts South Africa's history with 1652. And it shows, it details of how the so-called coloured identity was born in South Africa. Also a very racist account on the so-called coloured people, or just any indigenous group in South Africa. Another book, and I think this will be the kind of final books that I would mention, but there's many other here in front of me, is this particular book. Primesh Lalo borrowed me this particular book, and it really opened my eyes. So this particular book is The Politics of a South African Frontier, and it's the scholar is Martin Chetfield-Legasik, and it deals with the Griqua and the Tutu Tswana and the missionaries. So what that book tells us is that there was a growing expansion, and the expansion was because of kind of the exterminating force that Dutch colonialism came with, and how from Cape Town the quality just keep growing and growing and displacing people. And in this displacement, many people's lost their land, identity, their religion, and their culture. So this is what kept me busy with this couple of months. So I didn't neglect the channel. It's just that I needed to dive in and finish. I need to finish it. I really had to finish this book because it has to come out. Once it's out, I think I will shift my focus to other research areas, and that research areas is either go deeper into what this book is going to give, or broaden the scope and continue the work that I did on the DRC, which is the kind of conflicts that they raise from identities. So that's the two upcoming avenues. There's also a number of films that I'm working on that also really kept me busy. One of the films that kept me busy is The Broken String, but I will record a completely different segment on The Broken String. I hope you enjoyed this particular Raw Uncut section. Tell me which of the books you think I need to do a review on, and if there's anything that you would like to know about the colored identity or so-called colored identity, and I will share it on this particular platform. Thank you very much. May God bless, and until we see each other again. Bye-bye.